Ever since Han Sen began learning the Dongshuo Sutra, his perception had heightened. When he entered ultimate breath mode, the cells in his body were able to breathe freely, independently from the nose and lungs. This made Han Sen special. Previously, his breathing rhythm had affected his performance and his ability to channel power. But now, with Han Sen able to forget his concerns about breathing and not become winded, he was much freer. Through this curious talent he had learned through the Dongshuo Sutra, his ability to survey and assess a field of battle had been greatly improved, and he could perceive every little happening. Not a single movement and not a single drawing of breath could now escape Han Sen's attention. Without needing to attend to his own bodily rhythms, he could work his way around everyone else's. Even if he was surrounded, he could weave in and out between potential oppressors. Every step he took was in between someone's blind spot. He could swerve into places they could not reach, take advantage of a sole misplaced footstep, and manipulate enemies to exhaust their powers. It was an incredible rush for Han Sen to be able to do these things. It was as if he had entered God mode. With his great ability to perceive unfolding events, it was as if he was watching battles from high above. If he was once a chess piece, he had now become the player himself. Everything had fallen under his control. The 6 evolvers were now extremely frustrated. They had been trying to stop Han Sen's advance, but wherever he stepped was the exact spot that was the most unfavorable for them. When one evolver believed his colleague should be stepping in to stop Han Sen, the other would be thinking the same. When no move was made by either, Han Sen was already leaving them in the dust. It was incredible to see, as if the 6 evolvers were secretly aiding Han Sen. But this was the advantage and benefit the Dongshuo Sutra gave its learners. Everything was as clear as glass, and each situation could be read like a book. The sutra offered the powers of gods and demons, and whoever became a surpasser would receive them. Han Sen still hadn't reached the level of surpasser, but that didn't matter at this instant. His opponents were weaker than he was, which meant he could read their mind with ease. As a result, he was unstoppable. Seeing that 6 elites were unable to stop Han Sen's advance, a chill ran down Black God's spine. Black God's sworn foe was entirely different from the last time he fought him, and as he drew nearer, Black God began to feel a wicked fear take hold. "Kill him!" Black God shouted. As he did, Black God fell back. He had no idea why, but as he looked into the eyes of his fierce, lone attacker, a chill fell upon him. He started falling back even further. He did not dare to engage Han Sen in direct, one-to-one combat. The 237 evolvers were heavily armed, and they worked together to surround Han Senator. They presented a wall of spears, facing Han Sen like the craggy peaks of a mountain range. The points of the spears joined together like a trapping net and moved up and down like the roll of an ocean's waves. It looked as if they could shatter stone if they so chose. The people back in the goddess shelter were shocked. It appeared that the Black God army possessed talent and a unified strategy. They weren't a group composed of throwaway mercenaries and sellswords. To take a formation such as this was not something any ordinary regiment could do. It was obvious they had received much rigorous training. Otherwise, such seamless cooperation could not be possible. Young Monli was waiting alongside her team, watching the field with shredded nerves. With the killing abilities they appeared to possess, victory over them was something not even a collection of hardened elites could pull off. Her anxiety over the well-being of Han Sen became even greater. Han Sen was going up against a high-powered meat grinder. Surely any attack would be hopeless, unless he had the power to turn the tables. The evolvers in the Black God army had impressive fitness levels, and with them cooperating like this, it would take a person whose level was many times higher to turn the tide against them. The enemy was like a well-oiled machine, cogs turning flawlessly without a single hitch. If Han Sen's speed and power weren't as great as it had to be, the machine could not be stopped. Even if he was able to take a few of them out, there was a high probability of him being killed by others in the formation. And Han Sen was not wearing any armor. His entire body was exposed and weak. So to believe he could survive a battlefield in such conditions was an extremely dangerous endeavor. He was only wearing a traditional combat outfit that was standard issue for the Alliance. But now suddenly Han Sen changed, as a red armor suddenly appeared to clothe his entire body. His short hair grew into a stream of long, blonde locks. His eyes sparkled with the color of gold, and a ruby crown was lifted upon his head to decorate his new appearance. After his sudden transformation into a fairy queen, the whole world seemed to slow down in Han Sen's vision. The spears that had been coming towards him like arrows had slowed to a crawl. He danced like a butterfly, or more menacingly like a wild bat in the dark. His body moved incredibly quickly, managing to weave its way between the swordsmen and their spears. He formed a gap between the ranks of the assaulting formation, and after breaching through, ran towards Black God. Every evolver Han Sen passed by possessed a confusion in their heart. The position Han Sen chose to breach was strange to them. It looked as if he were going to go in another direction, but when they turned to look, he was back where he had started. Whenever they wanted to strike, Han Sen was already gone. With these godlike powers possessing his body, he was unstoppable. The evolvers on the battlefield felt hopeless and frustrated. Black God's face looked like mud. He could not believe that his formation, composed of over 200 evolvers, was unable to prevent Han Sen's advance. And he was frightened. Han Sen's power had reached such a degree that calling him strong was no longer fitting. He was almost inhuman. Kill him! Black God screamed as he continued to retreat. His heart felt as if it had been stabbed with ice. Han Sen's performance had been too frightening to watch, and still, Black God lacked the courage to battle his most despised enemy. The 6 evolvers from the front rushed back and caught up with Han Sen, who was now just beyond the formation and going for Black God. Their spears were like wretched dragons, and their swords were like soaring eagles. There were 2 elites now blocking Han Sen's way, the 2 from the army. They knew they had to capture their foe, but no matter how strong Han Sen was, he was alone. Under the strenuous pressure of the formation, it was only a matter of time before he grew tired. But if Han Sen was able to rush forward and slay Black God, then the army would be crushed. It would be hopeless without a leader. Han Sen leaped into the sky and danced across the swords and spears of his enemies before jumping towards Black God. Kill him! Black God's face was as white as a marble, and terror coated his words. The 4 evolvers were glad, for their beast soul weapons were now targeted on Han Sen from 4 different directions. Now that Han Sen was in the air, the only way he could avoid capture was if he suddenly sprouted wings and began flying. But Han Sen did not sprout wings, and so they approached him. Seeing Han Sen starting to descend, the swords and spears readied to join him. Alongside the 4 evolvers, many more were prepared to skewer Han Sen on his landing. He would truly be helpless if he fell into their trap. Han Sen was in the air and had raised his feet as if to tread invisible stairs. His body that had looked set to descend began rising up once more, and like an airborne projectile, he was homing in on Black God once more. Everyone was astounded. The ability to obtain power from the air and enable a person to leap again was extraordinary. People didn't believe their eyes. Treading Cloud from the Chan family, although not as effective as 7 twists which borrowed strength from the air itself 7 times, was enough for Han Sen to reach Black God. Black God was a hard, tough person. Seeing Han Sen fly towards him, he knew that it was now too late for him to turn back. He might be afraid, but still, he shouted and took on the appearance of an ape, wildly slashing in his opponent's direction. D! Black God screamed. His black longsword disappeared at the speed of light and reappeared directly in front of Han Sen's face. He cast Tornado Knife twice as quickly. Through the power granted to him from his simian transformation, his power had reached such an unbelievable height that the stroke of his sword was too fast to be witnessed by the human eye. Young. Seeing his black sword appear so close to Han Sen's beautiful Apollo-like face, Black God suddenly felt a numbness in his arm. The arm that held the sword could no longer be controlled, and he watched as it flew upwards. The sword nicked Han Sen's face and drew a shallow rivulet of blood. A few strands of golden hair were also cut and were carried off in the wind. Han Sen used his fist to block Black God's tornado knife, though none could see how, due to the speed at which events were happening. Almost at the same time, Han Sen's other hand performed a totally different action. His hand took the shape of a blade and shone like a bolt of lightning. Without warning, it swept forward like the attack of a ghostly assassin. Black God wanted to pull back his arm and attack again, but he noticed his vision begin to fade. Han Sen's face looked further away, and he felt as if he was flying, joining Han Sen in the air. To Black God, this all felt bizarre. In his vision, he now saw a familiar body, plated in black armor. The body was sitting upon a black wolf, but it lacked a head. From the stump of the body's neck, a fountain of blood spurted out. Plop! Black God was horrified, his eyes almost leaping from their sockets. The mouth was wide open, and blood gushed out. The area was soaked in ruby-rich blood. The battlefield went quiet. Everyone's eyes were now fixed on the airborne head, and they all looked astounded, unable to fathom what they were seeing. The master of the Black God shelter, the strongest man on the ice fields, the warrior who possessed the disappearing demon knife. His head had been cut off by a hand stemming from the middle of his army's formation. Everyone was rattled, distraught, as if they had all been frozen. All they could do was stare at the blond man who looked like a god, venturing into the battle alone and slaying the leader Black God amidst his hundreds of men. So easily, Han Sen had now enough of a reputation to instill fear into all who heard his name. The warriors still on the battlefield believed him to be a demon or god, and they quickly surrendered.
No.
No way. Zhu Ting's mouth hit the ground, and try as he might, could not close it. Out of the 6 evolvers with a fitness level of over 100, and the 237 elite evolvers present, none had been able to stop Han Senator. They had practically allowed him to sever the head of an evolver that was over 100 with his bare hands. No one could believe what they were seeing. Young Monli's face was red with excitement, and her beautiful eyes sparkled. Her heart was pumping like mad. Even she could hardly believe Han Sen had been able to kill Black God in such a fashion, in such a desperate situation. The formation that had faced him had been almost nothing to him. He had just waved his hand and ripped the head off, quick and clean, smooth as butter. Such unbelievable power. No wonder he is an heir of Coach Han. Uncle Qing looked bewildered as he spoke. The people wanting to open the gate were flabbergasted. They could not believe Han Sen had able to run up to such a mighty elite, surrounded by his great army, and slay him like so. Within 2 to 3 minutes, it was all over. Those few people felt a chill assault their necks, and they couldn't help but run their fingers around it. They felt that when Han Sen came back and found out how they had behaved, they'd all be headless within a few seconds. Many people started running towards the teleporter, consumed by fear. Han Sen had managed to hack someone's head off as if it were a game. In the midst of a huge battle, the Moners lacked the protection of the army, and neither were they elite evolvers that might have been able to fend for themselves. Their legs were turning to jelly as they made off to the teleporters. Many tripped over themselves before they reached the teleporter, and it was a comical sight to see them act like buffoons, all desperately attempting to clumsily escape. It would be a long time before any of them dared show their face at that shelter again. It would be no surprise if the sight of a bloody, airborne head haunted their dreams as a ghastly reminder of what transpired that day, either. The 6 supreme evolvers remained frozen. They had witnessed many strong people in their time, but this was unlike anything they had ever seen before. One single man, targeting the head of his opposition like a rocket, had managed to dance and weave through an army to get to his objective. Their army. Their hearts were chilled, and they abandoned all thoughts of fighting. They may have followed the command of Black God, but they only did so due to the Alliance sending them into his service. They had no great fondness of him, but now Black God had quite literally lost his head. They no longer felt obliged to fight for him. Their minds kept flashing back to the sight of Han Sen dodging and prancing past their entire forces to slay Black God, and as these images recurred, chills ran down their spines. The 6 had stayed put, and the ordinary evolvers didn't move either. Already, their minds raced with the thought of fleeing the scene. Han Sen, we only took orders from Black God. One evolver spoke out amidst the silence. We followed his command, that was it. We have no personal desire for conflict with you. Right now, Black God is dead, and there would be nothing to gain from further combat. Can we end it all now and call for a truce? Whoever attacks my shelter is an enemy. My enemies are not for you to determine, Han Sen coldly said. If we fight for our lives, you might not have the advantage, another elite said. Still, his voice trembled with the obvious desire to flee and not be forced to engage with Han Sen. Since you are here, then you must have your answer. If you fight, we fight until the last man is standing. If not, then you will join my goddess army. You will follow me as I lead an assault to destroy the Black God shelter. This will make you a soldier of the goddess army. Han Sen looked at them gleefully. The evolvers sounded as if they were hesitating. They were already frightened, and seeing the godly-looking Han Sen, the last thing they wanted was to fight him. Although there were 200 evolvers with them, they still didn't feel safe. But to surrender to him and take down the Black God shelter, they were afraid whether their main leader back in the Alliance would let them go so easily. I know the person called Dong Lin. After you return, you can register with me. Han Sen already knew much of the Black God's dealings and affairs from Tang Jinliu, so knew enough to make this suggestion. Hearing this, they no longer hesitated. True or false, Han Sen had already given them a reason not to fight. Stricken with fear, the last thing they wanted to do was battle. We are willing to join the goddess shelter and follow your lead. Numerous evolvers spoke in unison. The people in the goddess shelter were amazed, as all of this was happening so quickly. They had been lusting for their blood a few minutes prior, and yet here they were now, yielding to the command of Han Sen. In their eyes, the power of the Black God army was still strong. It was not as if they could fight back, so why would they so readily concede? The Black God shelter had had a change in ownership in the span of a single night. This was news that startled many. The Black God shelter also changed its name, becoming the Goddess Shelter. The same also applied to the smaller branches of the Black God shelter, so that they too adopted the new name of Goddess Shelter. No one was entirely sure what happened, and why everything had suddenly changed. Many people wanted to confirm the rumors for themselves. If anyone knew an evolver from what was previously known as the Black God Shelter, they could quickly find the answers they sought. And now, the name of Han Sen had spread to every corner of the ice fields during a single night. On the other side of Snow Mountain, Black God brought with him 300 elite evolvers and 6 evolvers that had a fitness level of 100 to attack the Goddess Shelter. When it was all over, Han Sen had managed to decapitate Black God by single-handedly breaching the protection provided by his army. Then they took over each and every Black God shelter overnight. Did you know that Han Sen is 8 feet tall, and his waist is 8 feet wide too? He has the strength of a monster. Black God brought 3,000 elite evolvers with him, and they battled together for 3 days and 3 nights. And guess what? Han Sen didn't even get a scratch. Are you sure? I heard it was an army of 30,000 that set out to attack Han Senator, and he effortlessly killed 10,000 people, which turned the rivers red with blood. The corpses, when stacked together, formed an entirely new mountain, and that was after filling a canyon. When it was all over, everyone in the Black God army was killed, which led to the Black God shelter surrendering. What are you guys talking about? Han Sen is an extremely beautiful woman. I don't believe it. How can Han Sen be a woman? That's a man's name. Well, you're missing something either way. You see, there was a really touching story in the midst of everything, and it was all about me. Han Sen and I used to be neighbors, and not many people know about this, but back in the day, the legends that surrounded Han Sen, out on the ice fields, quickly spiraled into madness. But despite the constant additions to the tales that were told, one thing remained constant. Han Sen had been able to bring down the Black God shelter in one night. The real warriors, like Li Xing Luan and Brother Philip, upon hearing the news, found it difficult to believe what had happened. It was more shocking for them to hear that than if Han Sen had managed to slay 30,000 evolvers with a single slap. Killing people was easy, but taking over territory was incredibly difficult. And to hear that Han Sen had managed to take over all the territory Black God previously owned was quite frightening. The reason why Han Sen had been able to effortlessly take ownership of the Black God shelter was the aid given to him by Tang Jinliu. Tang Jinliu used to say that if Han Sen managed to kill Black God, then he would be able to easily take over his power. Han Sen had simply decided to try it. He had then asked Tang Jinliu for assistance. If Tang Jinliu was able to do it, then Han Sen would have no issue with claiming ownership of the Black God shelter. If Tang Jinliu could not do it, then he would at the very least resort to ransacking and taking what he could from the place. Without enough people to take over a shelter, it would be a demanding task, but looting the place could be fruitful. In the end, Tang Zhenliu really did manage to take care of the people who had previously supported Black God. They drew a line and allowed Han Sen to take complete ownership of the Black God shelter. Li Xingluan and Brother Philip were now on their way to the Black God shelter to confirm with their own eyes the news they remained skeptical about. The original possessors of the Black God shelter were there, unharmed. Now, following the leadership of Han Senator, they may not have been harmed, but they looked dazed by what had happened. Han Sen did not plan on uniting the ice fields, for doing so would benefit him. After all, the people he had were not from his party, and he did not have enough of his own men to control all the shelters in the ice fields. Now, what Han Sen wanted the most was to find a way to group up with Li Xingluan and Brother Philip to attack the royal shelter, in an alliance composed of the three of them. It would be impossible for him to do it alone. After all, Li Xingluan and Brother Philip were relieved that Han Sen was not interested in becoming a self-imposed king of the ice fields. Taking over the Black God shelter had presented him with many benefits, however. Not only would he receive income from the Black God shelter, he would even obtain the swathes of information and intelligence that the Black God shelter held in its possession. There were many sacred blood class creatures residing across the ice fields. Although the Black God shelter could not eliminate them, their record-keeping housed a great deal of useful information on them. Such information had cost many their blood, sweat, and tears. It had cost the lives of many to collect. The effort taken by many generations to collect such intelligence was plain to see. It would have taken countless years for a sole person to collect and store such knowledge. It looks like the ice field is home to many sacred blood creatures. It would also appear that we lack the sufficient resources for their elimination. Han Sen browsed the scope of the information and decided to hunt a few to see whether he could capture a few more beast souls. Even though he had learnt the dual skill, he still required 2 sacred blood beast soul swords. Otherwise, it would not matter how strong his skill was. It would have been impossible for him to battle the twin spirit and emerge victorious with mutant beast soul swords. His weapons paled in comparison to their lethal rapiers. But after Han Sen had studied the information for a little while longer, the sacred blood creatures had him blurting out the impression he had formed of them. Strong. That was to be expected, of course. If they had been easy to kill, then Black God would have slain them already. The ones that still drew breath did so, because they could not be killed. They had to be terrifically fierce and powerful foes. Han Sen looked left and right, surmising that each of them would prove a difficult catch. But before he went to fight one, he wanted to study and learn about as many as he could. Amidst the records detailing the sacred blood creatures, Han Sen came across one that would yield him a sacred blood beast soul sword. This was a Silver Eye Ice Snake King, and its group was huge. There were original, mutant, and sacred blood variants on offer, but the latter beast soul could provide a Silver Eye Ice Snake Sword beast soul. As Han Sen checked the information he had on the sword, his desire to kill the sacred blood Silver Eye Ice Snake King increased. But the Silver Eye Ice Snake King lived out in the ice valleys. The landscape there was dangerous, and it would be difficult for him to bring an army over such a great and perilous distance. The group was huge, also, consisting of at least 10,000 of the snakes. And the powers of the snakes were substantial. They had silver scales that were icy. Sacred blood weaponry would have a difficult time piercing their flesh and inflicting damage. Their attacking power was fierce, as well, and their toxic teeth could bite through sacred blood shields. And they could fly. Across the Black God shelter's history, attempts to slay the beasts had been recorded. Black God himself had tried once, but he and his people had failed. No matter what they tried, none were able to slay the Silver Eye Ice Snake King. Han Sen was still considering how he might slay such a beast when he saw Zhu Ting. He was smiling at him, and then he came over, saying, "Leader, you still aren't resting?" "No, why? What's wrong?"
Han Sen smiled back at Zhu Ting.
So far, he had been as honest as could be, and had done nothing in defiance of Han's senator. If this behavior continued, then he was willing to keep him in the goddess army. "I have something for you, but I am not sure if you're interested." Zhu Ting pulled out what he had, and carefully showed it to Han Sen. Han Sen looked at what Zhu Ting had brought with him. They were a few sheets of parchment, with words written upon them. Despite not being printed words, they were not handwritten, either. They looked as if they had been rubbed in. What is this? Han Sen took a look at one of the papers. The words he read were as small as tadpoles, but they contained knowledge pertaining to Qigong. There were 3 sheets of paper, each containing a separate paragraph that seemed to bear no relation to the others. Nor did the paragraphs look complete, as there seemed to be large chunks of content missing from the pages. Boss, do you like the hyper-geno art featured in the papers?
Shu Ting smiled.
I can't read them, Han Sen said as he put the paper down, as the content only seemed to be a mishmash of texts that lacked cohesion. The words themselves were also complicated to understand, because they were archaic. He couldn't begin to understand what hyper-geno art, if any, was contained in those pages. Boss, have you heard of the hyper-geno art called Jade Sun Force? Zhu Ting asked, with a hint of mystery coating his words.
No.
Han Sen shook his head. The skill sounded in, but he had never heard of it. When you have some free time and return to the Alliance, why don't you browse the Skynet for information about this ability? If you like, we can then resume this discussion. Otherwise, I fear you won't believe me, no matter how much I praise this hyper-geno art. Zhu Ting paused briefly, then continued. My version is the real one. It stems from an ancient time. It was copied from a certain tablet, and I can assure you that it is the real thing. It's good stuff. Han Sen did not dismiss the idea. In fact, he rather liked it. He waited for Zhu Ting to depart, and when he did, returned to the Alliance. He wanted to find out more about this so-called Jade Sun Force. The search engine quickly presented numerous articles. It looked as if it was a fairly popular hyper-geno art. Han Sen picked a site at random. Do you want to stay long and hard? Do you want your partner or wife to moan and scream all night? Do you have problems staying hard or finishing too soon? If you said yes to any of these, then the Jade Sun Force is here for you. It will train you to become a man with a golden sword. You will soon be slaying your wife in bed, breaking her voice as she screams your name. What are you waiting for? Come order it today. Learn this and become a real man. What? Han Sen almost spat out the tea he was drinking. What the hell is this? He clicked on another link, but that too offered to sell the same hyper-geno art, one that was related to the suffering of an unhealthy kidney. Han Sen quickly realized that this was indeed a famous hyper-geno art. There were many different types of Jade Sun Force on the Skynet, each having been slightly modified to suit the various needs of different people. It was not unlike the skill panorama. They were all mostly the same, though. The Jade Sun Force was a hyper-geno art that seemed to be designed for the strengthening of a person's kidney, but its versatility lent itself well to the aiding and correction of many different sicknesses and debilitations which could afflict men. What is wrong with this Zhu Ting? Do I look like I need this skill? I could do it with 10 women in one night. Han Sen felt as if his very dignity had been slighted. Even his disposition had taken a nasty blow. It was no wonder Zhu Ting had told him to check the hyper-geno art out on his own. Besides, this cheap crap is all over Skynet. There is no need for me to buy it. I can just find it. Who needs this crap?
Han Sen felt personally offended.
Ding, ding, ding. Han Sen felt enraged and swore that he would teach Zhu Ting a lesson he would not soon forget. He would teach him not to underestimate the abilities of his master. But while he resolved to do this, the communicator rang. He accepted the call, and a beautiful image presented itself. It was Huang Fu Pingqing. Sister, your beauty only increases as the days go by. Han Sen saw Huang Fu Pingqing look both mature and attractive, and he couldn't help himself from complimenting her appearance as soon as he laid eyes on her. There was no harm in offering compliments. Besides, she used to be of great aid to him. Huang Fu Pingqing looked happy, and her face bore the most incredible smile. But then she froze, looked past Han Sen vacantly and sighed. Did my face grow flowers? Han Sen touched his face, wondering why she looked at him in the way she did. Little brother must be tired these days. Huang Fu Pingqing gave a strange look. My recent affairs have been tiring, and I've been constantly rushed off my feet. Han Sen answered her question casually, uncertain what she was wanting. Huang Fu Pingqing's expression was puzzling. After a moment, she said, although you are young, You should attend to your rest. Your body's health receives no reward from overexerting itself. Once she had said this, Huang Fu Ping Qing hung up. Is she insane? What was she even talking about? Han Sen looked at his communicator and felt quite annoyed at the encounter, unsure what was wrong with her. She called him, spoke some inane blabber, and then hung up. What could she have wanted? Thinking of that, Han Sen turned around to look at his monitor. He froze. Do you want to stay hard and long? Do you? The advert was still fully displayed, and he quickly understood what had happened. He understood why Huang Fu Ping Qing had acted strangely and hung up hurriedly.
No. No.
Han Sen felt like he was in trouble and frantically called up Huang Fu Ping Qing. This was really bad. If she told people that Han Sen was unable to perform effectively, he couldn't imagine the embarrassment. How would the girls he knew view him then? A chill ran down his spine just thinking about it. Shortly after, the communicator was connected. Sister, listen to me. Let me explain. Han Sen then tried to tell her why that advert had been on his screen. But he had only spoken 2 sentences before Huang Fu Ping Qing responded by saying, There is no need for you to explain your issue to me. I am not who you are. The woman from the Ji family is pretty, and you can do to her whatever you see fit. That has nothing to do with me. She didn't give Han Sen the chance to explain and hung up before he could start talking again. But then the communicator rang with someone else on the line. Han Sen was getting frustrated and wanted to call her back so he could explain. He was going to push the call button, but his fingers slipped to press receive. Ji Yanran's image appeared and gave Han Sen a fright. As Ji Yanran looked at Han Sen, she had a sweet smile. But that soon disappeared as well. Han Sen wanted to slap himself for having forgotten to close the advert again. He tried to explain, Calm down, Yanran. It isn't what you think. I found some time today, so that I may do it with you, but it's okay. It would be best if you go and train. I'll gladly wait for you to improve. Ji Yanran looked supportive. Han Sen felt himself going mad. Just when he wanted to explain, he heard someone else calling her. Ji Yanran then said to Han Sen, I'm going for a meeting. You should practice in the meantime. I won't disturb you, but make sure to get some rest. No, it's not like that. I can do it. I really can. Han Sen wanted to explain, but she had already hung up. Zhu Ting, I'm not done with you. Yelling continued to erupt from inside the room. Because Ji Yanran had to have a meeting, she turned off her communicator. In a frenzy, Han Sen ran to the teleporter and returned to the shelter. Zhu Ting, you son of a troll. Come out here. Boss, what is it? Zhu Ting left his room and couldn't help but notice Han Sen's soured expression. Zhu Ting turned and attempted to leave in a hurry, but Han Sen made sure to block his escape. Zhu Ting, you and your dreadful Jade Sun Force? Does it look like I need that sort of thing? My kidney is stronger than that of a titan. When I get hard, I sometimes scare myself. Han Sen scowled at Zhu Ting with dagger eyes and gritted his teeth. Zhu Ting felt a chill run down his spine. With a forced smile, he said, Boss, please don't get mad. This isn't what you think. Then what is it? Han Sen looked at Zhu Ting with murder in his eyes. Zhu Ting was genuinely afraid that Han Sen was going to beat him, so he raised his hands against Han Sen's chest while trying to explain as quickly as he could. This Jade Sun Force does improve a man's manliness, but that isn't the only thing that it does. Although using the Jade Sun Force could allow a man to do it 10 times without getting tired, a man such as you can already do that, surely. The benefit you can seek from the Jade Sun Force would not concern this. Of course, I can do that. Han Sen's face was starting to appear a little calmer. The Jade Sun Force's primary function is to strengthen a person's kidney. The kidney is a core organ of the human body, so its strengthening would yield benefits to your stamina, vitality, and power. What I presented to you was the real thing, taken from the Jade Sun tablet. It's not some crappy product you can order from a sleazy Skynet site. If you learn this hyper-geno art, you wouldn't even get winded after traveling 1,000 miles in a single day, Zhu Ting explained. Pfft, you sure make it sound revolutionary. I'd wager it's not any different to those rubbishy mail-order products on Skynet, Han Sen said. It's not the same, I assure you, Zhu Ting said. When the Jade Sun tablet was unearthed, a great many people desired it. After much quarreling, it was broken. The tablet, as it once existed, can no longer be seen. However, a few copies of the original tablet do remain. I possess one such copy. There are countless copies already posted across the Skynet. What makes yours so special? Han Sen thought Zhu Ting was playing him. It did not matter whether or the teachings of a hyper-geno art were a copy or not. All that mattered was whether the content within the copy was correct. Boss, this Jade Sun Force is different. There are many different versions out there on the Skynet, each retailer possessing their own. They each provide different effects, and many can be negative. Those on the Skynet can only make you a little stronger. After a brief pause, Zhu Ting continued, the original variant of this skill is quite amazing. Although many people know its content, people have interpreted it in different ways. What matters, however, are the words inside. Why? What about them? Han Sen was now curious. The words that come straight from the tablet possess a curious mystical quality. Although the contents are mostly the same, reading these words will endow you with a Jade Sun Force that isn't like the ones that are regularly taught. The original copy would indeed provide you with a special result. You may struggle to believe me, but I am telling you the truth. It could be a great boon for you. Han Sen picked up the papers, read them, and felt no different. Zhu Ting, be honest. Are you trying to lead me on right now? Han Sen was getting concerned and starting to truly believe that Zhu Ting was just pulling his leg. Perhaps the papers were nothing special.
No.
I copied this one myself. The real stuff is too precious. I was just worried that you'd destroy the parchments in a rage if I hadn't been able to talk about this properly and explain it. I brought you a fake version, but if you really want it, I can't provide you the genuine copy, Zhu Ting said quickly. Give me the real thing. But if I find out you have lying to me this entire time, do not blame me for being cruel to you. Han Sen stared at Zhu Ting with fierce eyes. Boss, if I give you the genuine Jade Sun Force, could we do so in a trade? I would like to request a few berserk mutant beast souls in exchange for this teaching.
Zhu Ting looked at Han Sen hopefully.
I'd have to consider it. Let me see what you have first, Han Sen said coldly. Zhu Ting dared say nothing further. He went to retrieve the proper copy. He returned after a while, bearing a small safe box. He placed the receptacle in front of Han's senator. He opened it carefully and brought out the genuine copy, which he then carefully placed on the table. Boss, see? I promised you that it was different to the last one I showed you. Zhu Ting spoke with renewed confidence. Han Sen studied the new one that Zhu Ting had brought out. Its mere presence felt different to look upon, but he couldn't quite tell in what way. He then took the 3 fake copies in one hand and the real one in the other. He read them all side by side. The words were the same, and so was their color. But seeing the genuine thing, there really was a feeling you couldn't quite put your finger on. Any real hyper-geno arts always permeated its nearby atmosphere with a mystic hue. After all, see, boss? I told you I wasn't lying, Zhu Ting smiled. There are some slight, noticeable differences. Han Sen stared at the real copy multiple times, trying to identify the strange feeling it was giving him. It's not just a little different. The differences are staggering. Since the Jade Sun tablet was destroyed, these legitimate copies have become the most treasured of articles. If you want to learn the proper Jade Sun Force, it's through the use of these that you can achieve it. The replicas over on Skynet are useless. Even if they did provide an advantage, it would be nothing a balanced diet and a few sit-ups could get you. Believe me, if you want to learn the Jade Sun Force, these are exactly what you need. Zhu Ting continued to wax lyrical over the greatness of the copies he owned. How would you like to trade, then? Han Sen averted his gaze when he asked Zhu Ting this. 5 parchments composed the entire copy. How about 1 page for 2 berserk mutant beast souls? Zhu Ting did not have to consider this for long, having prepared to make this exact offer. Are you insane? You want to own 10 of my berserk mutant beast souls for this piece of crap? Han Sen's eyes were wide open, flabbergasted at Zhu Ting's proposition. But this is the real. Zhu Ting tried to say, but he was cut off. 3 berserk mutant beast souls and 2 ordinary mutant beast souls. That is all I will offer you for this thing. Take it or leave it. The choice is yours. Boss, please give me more. This is a one-of-a-kind artifact. You won't find anything else like this across the entire universe. Zhu Ting looked upset at his plight. That's all I can offer. If you don't like it, lump it. Han Sen turned to leave. He only had that much to offer on hand right now, but his counteroffer was mostly driven by a desire to prevent too many berserk beast souls be available amongst the populace.
Fine.
3 berserk and 2 ordinary ones. I accept. Zhu Ting clenched his teeth as he agreed to Sen's offer. Han Sen glanced over the documents he was about to receive in exchange to ensure there were no problems or tricks to hand. He then sealed the deal. Han Sen turned and walked on a few steps, but he then turned around and asked Zhu Ting, "Once I have learnt this, can I truly take on 10 people at the same time?" Han Sen returned to his room and began studying the 5-page copy of Jade Sun Force. With his knowledge of ancient lexicon, he had little trouble in deciphering the text. The characters were archaic, and the content of the hypergeno art was rich. Overall, it seemed like a good skill to strengthen one's kidneys. As he continued to stare at the parchments, they emanated a mystical aura. As Han Sen studied them, he felt that he was understanding more and more about it. The closer Han Sen looked, the more his understanding and perception of that enigmatic aura clarified. This is what the Jade Sun Force is. It's not as disgusting as Zhu Ting said. It isn't unlike the heresy mantra, though that one strengthens a person's heart. Instead, Jade Sun Force just strengthens your kidneys. Han Sen finished reading and came to this conclusion with much surprise. Han Sen became ever more surprised when he realized how good this skill actually was. It was definitely a skill that wasn't easily attainable and which could be greatly sought after. But why had Zhu Ting give it to him with such little resistance? From the way Han Sen saw it, Jade Sun Force wasn't far off the heresy mantra. If strengthening your heart was meant to strengthen your force and amplify your powers, then strengthening your kidney was like upgrading your power storage tank. If your kidneys were not upgraded with Jade Sun Force, it would be like using coal to produce fire and warmth. It was effective, but not efficient. It wasn't a clean burn either. But if you were to upgrade your kidneys, it would be like using a clean burning gas like propane. Effective, efficient, and longer lasting. The improvements were huge. Right now, it was like using regular fuel to try propel a rocket into space. Once he was strengthened, Han Sen suspected he'd be able to learn a wider variety of skills, and to use them more effectively than ever. His stamina and strength would reach a whole new level. If all this was correct, Han Sen's combat abilities would be greater than ever, and his peak performance duration during prolonged fights would almost without equal. In the past, it had been determined that to be among the best, you had to be able to remain unexhausted of any amount of power for up to 2 hours. But by strengthening your kidneys in this way, he believed he could fight at maximum capacity for 24 hours. Han Sen was wary, however. He was suspicious of why Zhu Ting would so casually present him such a significant skill. Had he realized the full extent of this skill beforehand, he would have gladly traded more berserk beast souls to get his hands on it. Han Sen then guessed that Zhu Ting must have already learnt the Jade Sun Force himself. It was likely that many others had learned it too, before it had somehow fallen into Zhu Ting's lap. But when they learned it, it wasn't as efficient, and it only worked to slightly increase their typical strength, alongside their outstanding capabilities. This was most likely due to their lesser understanding. Truly understanding the entire texture and richness of the words on those parchments was a talent only possessed by a few. Han Sen was able to understand the full extent of the hypergeno art, first, because his brain had been combined with blood crystal. This had already led to a natural increase in abilities of perception. But the second reason rested in his recent understanding of the Dongshuo Sutra. His manner of perceiving and thinking was clearer, and so, reading the copy of the Jade Sun Force provided him the greater subtext that had been missed by so many others. For ordinary people, the power bestowed upon them through Jade Sun Force was weak and unsubstantial. Their perception was too limited to glean the small differences that separated what they learnt and what Han Sen could learn. Put simply, they couldn't understand Jade Sun Force. After Han Sen practiced Jade Sun Force a few times, he felt his kidneys vibrate like warm stones. He felt as if there were 2 little stoves alight inside, energizing him. He felt like he wouldn't need any rest, even if he was to run for 3 days and nights. This is a great skill. After I master it, I would have no problem battling 10 creatures, all at once. Han Sen was in a great mood. But perfecting Jade Sun Force was sure to take a long time, and Han Sen wasn't in a rush. He was still wondering how he might slay the Silver Eye Ice Snake King. After all, if he lacked 2 sacred blood swords, an infinite amount of stamina wouldn't matter against the twin spirit. Luckily, Han Sen was in control of the Black God shelter now. Although the elites of their former master were not under his direct command, they still secretly listened to Dong Lin and not Han Senator, but if it was for the slaying of a sacred blood creature, they would definitely come along. Han Sen carefully looked at the list of elites belonging to the Black God shelter and handpicked 10 people to join him on his quest to slay the Silver Eye Ice Snake King. Boss, we tried hunting the Silver Eye Ice Snake King once before with Black God. We didn't succeed, as it was far too difficult. In the domain of that wretched creature, the efficiency of our powers was dampened and subdued. To be surrounded by snakes is no small task. It is wickedly dangerous. A few of the elites that had accompanied Black God in the hunt had their faces contort with fear as they heard Han Sen's plan to venture there and slay the beast. They attempted to change his mind. I have already made my decision. Stop the chatter and follow my commands, Han Sen responded coldly. At this, some of the elites lost hope. Dong Lin and Han Sen had already come to an agreement, so for this task, those who had been selected had no choice but to accompany him. Han Sen brought 10 people with him to Ice Snake Valley. They had cartographic documents with them, so they had little trouble navigating through the snow to get to where they wanted to be. They all reached their destination in fine health. It was said to be an ice valley, but in reality the location appeared more like a glacier Grand Canyon, where colossal rifts in the frost-bitten grounds had parted to form narrow basins, and where snow could collect in dangerous amounts. If you were to fall into it, you would be sure to be submerged in the snow. On the snow fields they now treaded, movement from beneath the snow could be seen. It was movement from a silver-white ice snake, tunneling forward like a rabid earthworm. The ice snakes were white, with eyes of deadly silver. When they were submerged in the piles of snow, they were camouflaged and nearly impossible to see. If one didn't pay close attention, they'd never see them before it was too late. They did not know how many ice snakes populated this perilous canyon, and that if any of the creatures bit you, you would be immediately paralyzed with frostbite. A well-armed person might be able to withstand the bite of an ordinary ice snake, but if they were to be bitten by a mutant variant, it wouldn't matter if their fitness level was over 100. Succumbing to such a bite would freeze you in no time at all. Those 10 evolvers were over 100, but their great talents did little to stave off their fear. They did their best to delay and drag out the venture there, taking their time as if their life depended on it, because it did. Han Sen noticed this, but wasn't upset. Instead, he smiled and said, "Well, how about this? You don't have to risk your lives and enter the valley. I will go alone to draw out the Silver Eye Ice Snake King. I will lure it all the way here, so that we can fight it together, free from the intrusions of the other snakes." Good, good, good. The elites all nodded in delighted agreement. They didn't want to set foot in that valley at all. The dangers there were too much for them, and if Han Sen went in alone, it wouldn't be their fault if he died. But there is something I must tell you first. If I draw out the Silver Eye Ice Snake King, and someone decides to flee, do not blame me for being cruel in my response to your desertion. Even Dong Lin will be unable to help out any cowards that run. Han Sen eyed each of them coldly. In response, one of the evolvers said, "Do not worry, boss. We aren't like that. We will do our best to help you slay it." Though his mouth said that, his heart felt something else. Like the rest, he believed that if Han Sen truly ventured there alone, he wouldn't be coming back. They initially believed that Han Sen might have wings and was planning to fly into the valley to draw the Snake King out. It was nearly impossible for someone to walk down there. The depth of the snow was greater than any man, and if you were to sink into it when trying to walk on top of it, you'd be sinking into a white grave occupied by unwelcoming snakes. It would be certain death. If Han Sen could fly, he would fare better, but not by much. The ice snakes also possessed the ability to fly, and so an unbalanced dogfight would quickly ensue. Although they couldn't fly too high, for as long as he would be in the ice valley, it would be impossible for him to escape their pursuit. That's why they thought Han Sen's decision to go in, alone, was a suicidal move. But there he went, walking into the valley. Without wings, Han Sen had learnt the talent Ice Skin, however, and so was unafraid of being frostbitten. That's not to say he planned on getting bitten by the snakes, though. As he stepped into the ice valley, Han Sen leapt into a sprint. As he ran, his footsteps were so slight that they only left a shallow indent in the snow, and you could only trace them by paying close attention. Treading cloud, aside from borrowing strength from the air itself, allowed a person to be as light as the cloud the skill was named after. If perfected by its user, the ability to traverse across fields of snow without leaving a trace was wholly possible. The evolvers that remained watched Han Sen go, motionlessly. The skill they observed unnerved them, making them believe that Han Sen was greater than what could be defined as an evolver. Although Han Sen's body was really light, it still drew the attention of the ice snakes. He noticed 2 ice snakes leaping out from their white, powdery crypts to attack him. The silver-scaled creatures glistened in blinding white beneath the sun of that day. They stretched their bodies and spread their wings like giant cicadas. They dive-bombed towards Han Sen but missed, and so twirled in the air to try again. Han Sen had read the profiles of the snakes before and knew that the ice snakes had wings. Although they could not fly high, they had incredibly strong gliding abilities. Because of this, he knew he could not risk slowing down, so he pushed forward, dodging the snakes that lashed towards him. He didn't kill the 2 ice snakes because he only wanted to draw the ire of the Snake King and lead it out. If he killed the 2 ice snakes, the scent of their blood would rally every other snake in the valley. And if that happened, he would be in big trouble. He ignored the 2 chasing snakes and continued to push onward. A few other snakes occasionally joined the fray, but they did not pose much of a threat to Han's senator as he glided along the snow. He continued to dodge every attack as he pushed into the canyon. The evolvers watching on the outside looked at each other, observing how they all looked shocked. It was extremely rare to witness an evolver possess so much skill. Do you think he can actually draw out the king? One evolver posed the question with a strange look as he watched the fleeting humanoid shadow dance across the valley. I'm not sure. You can't really tell with this person, an evolver responded. The boss wants us to collect as much information about him as we can, but if we report everything we see, do you think the boss will believe us? I hope the boss doesn't end up making us go against him. This man is too scary. If we were enemies, I'd feel terrified every waking moment. Although we have a lot of protection, I would still fear Han Sen decapitating me. The level of his skill is frightening. I hope not, too. Following him isn't too bad. He's not as cruel and conceited as Black God was, for one thing. You can actually reason with Han Sr. Before long, Han Sen was gone from their sight. The snowy mountain was 100 miles long, and all Han Sen knew was that the Snake King was in some sort of icy cave in the middle of the valley. So he made sure to go in that direction. After Han Sen had traveled for 10 miles, 300 ice snakes were in hot pursuit of him. Surprisingly, that was a good result. If he had killed just one ice snake, tens of thousands of ice snakes would be nipping at his heels. Weird. Shouldn't the ice cave be around the 30-mile mark? I've already been running for 40 miles. Why haven't I seen it yet? Han Sen was puzzled. By now, 1,000 ice snakes were chasing him. He was lucky that he was skilled enough to outpace and dodge every snake that attacked him. But as time went on, he reached a narrow gulf where steep icy slopes tunneled him forward. Yet he still couldn't see an ice cave. The legends say that the silver-eyed ice snake king's body was absolutely huge, at least 100 meters long. You would need an ice cave 200 meters wide for it to fit, and the entrance to such a subterranean abode would be hard to miss. Han Sen ran on for another 20 miles, but still saw no sign of the ice cave or its supposed inhabitant. In his heart, he started wondering whether he had been played. Was it incorrect intelligence? Was it by chance? Or was it purposely incorrect? After thinking it through, he realized that it wasn't possible. The information was quite dated, and they had no idea Han Sen was planning to kill the Snake King. It would have been impossible for them to do something like this in such a short window of opportunity. I suppose I'll have to venture even further. Han Sen continued to push, but something strange caught his eye. The group of ice snakes that had been giving him chase was now significantly smaller. As he traveled further, More and more snakes abandoned the chase, until a few miles later, they were all gone. A chill took Han Sen's heart, and he said, "Is this the Snake King's territory? Do they not dare venture near it?" But that didn't feel right either. If he had truly arrived where the Snake King was, the ice snakes should have been protecting their king. They shouldn't have been running away. Han Sen thought there was something wrong with the ice valley. Something must have happened that had changed it. He looked around, but was unable to see what was outside the ice valley. Because of the snow around him, he couldn't detect the presence of further ice snakes. What's more, a deafening silence now permeated the atmosphere of the valley. The sun was choked by clouds, and more snow began to fall. Although it wasn't particularly rough, a depressed, frigid feeling overtook him. There was no wind to carry the snow. It just fell straight down on the snow that already blanketed the valley. It felt desolate and lonely. "I've already come this far. I can't turn back now." Han Sen didn't want to give up just yet, so he gritted his teeth and pushed on. He had a berserk sacred blood wing, so he could always fly away. The ice snakes, if they decided to resume their chase, wouldn't be able to catch him that way. As such, there was nothing to be afraid of. Han Sen walked another 20 miles without finding a single snake. After his arduous trek, he reached an ice wall in front of him. It was smooth, but to his right and left, an array of lethal glaciers boxed him in. He had now reached the end of the canyon. Suddenly, Han Sen was able to make out the presence of an ice cave in the wall of ice in front of him. It wasn't what he expected, however, as it was 3 meters tall and only 1 meter wide. It looked strange, being so tall and so thin. He didn't see anything from the entrance, so he summoned his golden armor and glyph. After doing so, he ventured inside. The ice cave wasn't too deep. After walking a few miles, he had reached the end. Once he got there, the narrow cave opened into a wide cavern. Han Sen hadn't faced any danger or come across a single creature on his way there. In the icy hall, Han Sen noticed the presence of an egg that was about half the height of a fully grown human. Its silver hue made it look metallic, and its glossy exterior was adorned with a variety of finely engraved patterns. Han Sen felt happy at making this discovery. He ran towards the egg and said, "Haha, the gods must love me. I can't believe I have found such an egg. It must belong to the Snake King." Han Sen knew that it was difficult for creatures to bear children. Golden roars exhausted all they could to produce offspring, and they imparted their young with their geno essence. Doing so always led to the willing deaths of their mothers. But the cavern and ice cave were entirely clear, and there was no sign of the Snake King. To Han Sen, this was a golden opportunity, and he did not hesitate to reach out his hand to touch the metallic, silver egg. Arg! Han Sen's fingertips recoiled at receiving an electric shock. The hair on his fingers now stood on end. The charge that had shot into his body made him take 2 steps back, and he almost fell over. My God, what is this egg? Why is it electric? Han Sen's eyes were wide open, staring at the egg in puzzled confusion. He then saw how the eggshell's patterns were highlighted, but from its previously bright appearance, was now turning dim. Han Sen eyed the egg with suspicion. He had eaten numerous eggs in the past, but never seen an egg quite like this. While he was thinking, a noise came from outside. Han Sen was startled, thinking that the Snake King had returned. He pricked up his ears to listen, but all he could hear were the sounds of human footsteps. Han Sen frowned, looking out towards the cave entrance. The guys he had brought with him had not dared come this way, so whoever it was, they weren't associated with Han Sen or his Snake King excursion that day. Taking a look, Han Sen saw a person with blue armor, black hair, and white wings enter the cave. As he had suspected, it wasn't one of the evolvers that he had left behind. But, to his comfort, it was someone he knew.
Yi Dongmu.
Han Sen watched him curiously, and then called out his name. He had never expected to see him here, but judging from his apparel, he had just flown in. It was fortunate that this place had no ice snakes, for flying in like that would have given him a rude welcome. Although you were here first, according to the rules, whoever claims it first owns it. Idongmu saw where the silver egg was and, in a flash, used all his energy to dash towards it. No, don't. Han Sen reached out and attempted to grab Idongmu. Seeing Han Sen, Yi Dongmu used his strength to go even faster. When he reached his prize, he hugged the egg with open arms. Aerarg! Yi Dongmu cried out as letting out a final death cry. Brutally electrified, all his hair spiked upwards. He fell to the floor hard, his hands outstretched as if he was still hugging the egg. He seemed to have been paralyzed by the electric shock. Han Sen smiled as he walked to catch up with Yi Dongmu. He shook his head and said, "I didn't want to stop you from getting the egg. I was just trying to grab you and prevent this from happening. I was trying to be nice." Yi Dongmu stared at Han Sen disapprovingly, not believing him. Han Sen watched Yi Dongmu struggle to sit up and wanted to laugh. Earlier, he had in fact misled Yi Dongmu, because he wanted to find out if there still was electricity coming out of the egg after he had touched it. Han Sen received his answer. But it was now evident that this egg was no ordinary egg. It clearly was a powerful one. Poor Yi Dongmu was taking a long time to recover from the shock, but he could hardly blame Han Senator. It was his own fault for rushing towards it, after all. I had never heard of the Silver Eye Ice Snake King possessing electric skills. I thought it could only inflict frostbite. How can this egg have such strong electricity? Han Sen walked around the egg a few times, observing it. The pattern on the egg seemed to have been highlighted again after it shocked Yi Dongmu, but the light was once again beginning to fade. "Mr. E, I believe we are going to have to crack this egg open. Otherwise, we will be unable to eat it. I am weak compared to you, so maybe you should go ahead and do it." Han Sen turned to look at Yi Dongmu again, watching as he struggled to move his limbs. Yi Dongmu gave Han Sen a disdainful look, as if to say, "Do you think I am a fool?" Han Sen did not dare to try to smash the egg, as the electricity given by a small touch was painful enough. If he went to smash it, and the electricity inside was unleashed, what if it turned him into charcoal? Seeing Yi Dongmu still unable to move, he didn't dare go first. He started to think how he might get it open. If he returned to the Alliance, he could get himself a strong pair of insulated gloves. But he was a long way from there, and the electricity in the egg seemed unstable. Perhaps the gloves wouldn't provide much help anyway, and since he didn't own a pair himself, he would have to go to the hassle of buying one. But who would have guessed there would be an egg emitting such crazy amounts of electricity in such a place? Han Sen hadn't prepared for this scenario, so his options were limited. If he did decide to return, Han Sen didn't want to leave the egg behind, either. "Mr. E, if we have come all this way, there's no way we can return empty-handed. Are you sure you wouldn't mind trying again?" Han Sen wanted to convince Yi Dongmu to give the egg another try. "Nope, but I'll watch you give it a go." Yi Dongmu didn't move and continued to sit there. His face was pale, suggesting the electricity had injured him significantly. "If you aren't willing to give it a shot, then of course I won't. But if neither of us are willing to touch it, then being here is a waste of time. And for that, I cannot remain. I will leave now." Han Sen then began walking away, but Yi Dongmu continued to sit where he was. He didn't even try to stop Han Sen from exiting. "I really am leaving now." Han Sen slowly walked a few more steps, making sure Yi Dongmu could hear him. Yi Dongmu simply scowled at Han Sen and muttered, "Whatever." Han Sen walked another 2 steps forward, but then walked back. With a smile, he said, "You must be quite lonely. I shouldn't abandon you like this. Perhaps I should just stay and keep you company." Yi Dongmu rolled his eyes. He wasn't a big fan of Han Sen, that was for sure. But Han Sen really wanted to get Yi Dongmu to give it another go. And he was afraid that if he left, and Yi Dongmu managed to crack it open on his own, he would take all the egg yolk. That would mean a wasted trip for Han Sen. While both of them were talking, a cracking noise could be heard coming from the egg. They both jumped and looked at it. They saw the half-human tall egg had a few cracks on it. Somehow, it was beginning to open by itself. Han Sen and Yi Dongmu both jumped up and anxiously watched the egg open. If the egg was cracking because they had touched it earlier, then it was okay. But if this was a natural occurrence, then they would be in trouble. Catcha! Another cracking noise sounded, and a splintered ravine of cracks now ran the length of the egg. Han Sen and Yi Dongmu took a few steps back, watching the silver and metal egg with high alert. It was only an egg, but it discharged great torrents of electricity. It certainly wasn't normal. If a creature did reside inside the egg, even as a newborn, They suspected it might possess terrible, powerful abilities. Crack, crack. More and more cracks began to run down the sides of the egg, until a plate of the shell was smacked open. Inside, a fluffy silver head was trying to poke its way out of its shell. The eyes of the creature were only half open. The creature was attempting to claw its way out of the eggshell. It's not a snake? Han Sen and Yi Dongmu both froze, having believed it was going to be a baby of the Silver Eye Ice Snake King. This was not what they had expected. The creature that was trying to pry its way out was coated in a silver fur, and it had long, sharp ears. It was a little fox, and its eyes burned with the passion of a phoenix. The small animal finally managed to break free and leave the egg. Although it was freshly hatched, it was about the same size as an adult tanuki. Its fur was lush and full, and a majestic tail swept the shell behind it. It looked as if it had been built to thrive in the harsh, icy environment it had been born in. Plop. After exiting the eggshell, the creature was unable to stand steady. With unsteady limbs, it dropped to the ground. The fall must have hurt it, because it screamed twice. Oh hell, why does something like this exist here, in the Snake Valley? And I've never heard of foxes hatching from eggs. Han Sen gave it a perplexed look. Yi Dongmu then seemed to move, dagger in hand. Like a gust of wind, he started rushing towards the weakened animal that was still spread out on the ground in pain. He targeted one of its half-open eyes and attempted to kill it. But Han Sen took a few steps back instead. This scene was all too familiar for him. When the Golden Roar was born, he had played the role Yi Dongmu was now fulfilling. Ding! Yi Dongmu was a talented assassin, and although his attacks were unpredictable, they were lethal. The tip of his dagger had been driven directly into the silver fox's eyelid, but the knife was stopped in its place, its bloodlust greeted by the sound of hammered steel. The eyelid was made of metal. Howl! The silver fox cried out, but Yi Dongmu was undeterred, and he tried to push the blade in with greater strength. But before he could do anything more, a lightning bolt arced to the dagger in his hands, and from the metal of his weapon, an incredible current of electricity surged through his body. Pang! The silver fox fell onto the floor again, while Yi Dongmu was flung away. So strong was the current that even his armor had been blackened. The white wings that he wore were now charred, with their plumage reduced to a few sparse, smoldering feathers. This time the damage was even greater. When Yi Dongmu hit the ground, he lay crumpled, unable to move, and had Han Sen not been able to detect his heartbeat, he would have thought him dead. Holy smokes! This thing is the child of a super creature. Han Sen felt a chill run down his spine, as he confirmed that this creature was indeed not of the sacred blood variety. Yi Dongmu possessed great power, and with the force he had thrust into his dagger strike, there should have been no way the creature could remain damaged, if it was just a newborn sacred blood creature. When Han Sen fought against the Golden Roarer, the same thing had happened. But the first shelter's super creatures only dealt brute, raw damage. They lacked the skills and intricacies of other super creatures Han Sen had later come to know. And when he did go against the Golden Roarer, he hadn't been as badly hurt as Yi Dongmu was now. The previously docile silver fox was now angry. It pulled itself onto its paws and quickly followed his aggressor, running to where Yi Dongmu now lay crumpled on the ground. It seemed like the silver fox wanted to reverse what had just happened. Han Sen ran over to the severely injured Yi Dongmu and attempted to pull him away. Yi Dongmu was one of his biggest clients, and one who never haggled for a bargain. If he was to die here in such a matter, that would be a bad break for his business. Han Sen pulled Yi Dongmu to the trail that led outside. The silver fox attempted to pursue its intruders, but it had only just been born and was still weak and unable to fully control its body. So when it went after them, it could barely walk straight, let alone maintain the pace it would have needed to keep up with them. Han Sen did not dare do anything aggressive towards the silver fox. He only dragged Yi Dongmu to the exit. He dreaded the thought of making himself the enemy of a super creature's baby. He knew that these infants could be strange, especially those that were born from a mother's belly. From what he understood, those that came from an egg were quite different. It was too early for Han Sen to assess the specific differences, but the little golden roar's flesh did not decompose like most super creatures. And when Angel ate its flesh, she gained an evolution of her abilities. As great as this was, it was a unique circumstance offered by a unique creature. It wasn't something that could be replicated or relied upon to happen again. Han Sen thought he could easily lose the tail of the silver fox at the speed it was giving chase. Upon exiting the ice cave, he dragged Yi Dongmu for a distance of 10 miles. Looking around to determine whether he was being followed, he thought it a good time to observe the severity of Yi Dongmu's wounds. They was very bad. In several areas, his skin had frayed and torn open in response to the power of the electric shock. In many places, his skin had turned black and green. It was fortunate he was wearing armor, for if he hadn't, he would have died the second he was shocked. Although he wasn't dead, he was critically injured. I am such a nice guy, saving you from certain death. I'll keep you to this, so that you can repay the debt sometime in the future. Han Sen applied some medicine to the wounds of the incapacitated Yi Dongmu. As he tended to his injuries, he said, "It's a shame that I'm being forced to use my pricier salves on you, as well. When you wake up, I won't hesitate to give you the bill." Arg! Yi Dongmu came to screaming, flinching from the pain. Although later effective, application of the medicine Han Sen was using stung terribly. "Stop screaming. Aren't you a man of some bravery? If you can't suffer this, how can you expect to be a person of great deeds in the future?" Han Sen's bedside manner left a little to be desired. "You didn't even give me some anesthetic before you poured that hellfire on my wounds. Why don't you give it a go, eh? We'll see whether you scream, asshole." Yi Dongmu's face was pale with the pain, and his lips trembled. With little regard for civility under the current circumstances, he couldn't help but swear. "I'm sorry, but I didn't bring anesthetic with me. This is all I have, so what else do you expect me to do? Just bludgeon your way through the pain. At least you aren't in risk of dying." Han Sen cleared his throat and got to applying more of the salve on the wounds he hadn't attended to yet. Arg!
Yi Dongmu skreamei magain.
He grabbed Han Sen's leg and bit down on it. Arg! When Han Sen was in the ice cave, he had put his armor away when he heard Yi Dongmu first enter. He felt a savage pain from every tooth that now dug into his calf, and he couldn't help but accompany Yi Dongmu in writhing in agony. "Let go of me. Are you a goddamn shark? You just bite and don't let go." Han Sen pushed his biter's head, but the pain Yi Dongmu was suffering from was too much, and every aspect of him rattled. Afraid he might end up biting his own tongue off, he tried biting into the nearest item he could, which just happened to be Han Sen's leg. Han Sen continued crying in pain, so he slapped Yi Dongmu's head numerous times. When Yi Dongmu finally let go, he rolled over on the icy ground. It was as if his entire body had been drained of energy, and he was left gasping and wheezing on the floor for recovery. When Han Sen looked at his leg, he saw blood seep from 2 teeth marks. Just as he was about to shout at the man beside him, he witnessed a silver shadow heading his way. It was the silver fox. Han Sen's face changed. The silver fox had only just been born, but it was already so quick. What's more, it was accelerating as it got nearer. Before long, it stood just 5 meters from them. For a brief moment, Han Sen thought about summoning his wings to escape. But the silver fox didn't do anything. It just stood there watching Han Sen with its phoenix-like eyes. Han Sen's heart was chilled, and he took a few steps back, removing himself from Yi Dongmu's proximity. He thought to himself, "What are you looking at me for? The person who attacked you is right there." But the silver fox didn't look at Yi Dongmu at all. Its eyes just traced Han Sen's every move, which scared him. As Han Sen moved to the left, his steps were accompanied by the silver fox's gaze. Han Sen's heart was thumping, and he said, "Oh no! Are this creature's eyes so weak that it can't recognize who harmed it?" Yi Dongmu was still on the floor, but then all of a sudden, he quickly summoned another pair of purple wings and flew off into the sky. "Thanks so much. I'll make sure to pay you back later," Yi Dongmu said as he flew away. Han Sen was angry and said to himself, "What an ungrateful son of a troll. If I hadn't saved you earlier, you'd be fox puppy chow. And now you leave me here, all alone?" Yi Dongmu didn't even look back as he ascended. He just flew right above the ice valley and soared away. It wasn't long before he had totally vanished from sight. Han Sen knew that Dongmu had been heavily injured and left unable to fight. As such, he wasn't really angry at him. It was a matter of principle, more than anything. The silver fox continued to stare at Han Sen, but did so with a puzzled expression. Han Sen did not feel that the silver fox was being aggressive and intended to kill him. But it was natural for creatures to do this, and such habits were not easily hidden. Still, Han Sen knew that the fox did not intend to murder him. But as the fox stood there, staring at him, Han Sen couldn't help but feel uneasy. After all, a creature's whim can change in an instant. What if it became hungry in the next instant and decided to use Han Sen for a snack? Okay, little guy, your bones have grown really strong, and your face has a holy aura. You'll undoubtedly grow to become something quite powerful in the future. But if you want to eat a sacred blood creature or something. Not me. My flesh is cheap and lacks the nutrients a young and healthy fox such as yourself would require. As Han Sen tried to appease the silver fox, he slowly stepped backwards. But every step back that Han Sen took, the silver fox stepped forwards. When Han Sen went left, it went right. The way it stared seemed to suggest that it recognized him. Oh, what are you following me for? Han Sen's mind raced, wondering what exactly was going on. All of a sudden, he thought, cats and dogs love to chase things. People would often throw balls for cats and dogs to catch or chase. The fox wasn't too different from a cat or a dog. Perhaps it shared the same habit? Han Sen rummaged through his pockets, but was unable to find a ball. All he could find was a fist-sized bottle. Inside it, however, was an elixir worth tens of thousands. This was the sort of medicine he wasn't willing to spend on Dongmu. With his own life on the line, however, he just bit down and lobbed the bottle away. Han Sen was only trying to see what would happen before the silver fox thought of killing him. As he had hoped, the silver fox watched where the bottle went, sprang to its feet, and chased after it. Han Sen was delighted, as he hadn't been sure whether it would actually work. With the time he just bought himself, he immediately turned and started running. The last thing he wanted to do was displease a super creature, and after seeing what had happened to Dongmu, he was aware of the stakes. But Han Sen hadn't run far when he saw the silver fox running across the white snow. Despite running as fast as he could, the silver fox was able to catch up with him with ease. In the silver fox's mouth, the creature was holding the bottle Han Sen had thrown away. Han Sen was flabbergasted at how quickly the silver fox had caught up with him, and knew that his own running speed was nowhere close enough. Now he was seriously considering the prospect of summoning his wings and taking to the skies. But the next second, Han Sen gave up that idea. The silver fox then chose to rapidly climb a tall rock pillar, and when it reached the top, it jumped. Its leap arced over 10 meters, and the speed at which it soared was faster than Han Sen's berserk sacred blood wings. If Han Sen really did summon his wings, and that angered the silver fox, he was likely to incur a far more grievous attack than what befell Dongmu. Han Sen stopped running, feeling hopeless. The silver fox also stopped and stood just a meter away. It placed the medicine bottle on the ground near Han Sen's feet. Good boy. Han Sen forced a smile. He wanted to pat the silver fox on his head and stroke it in congratulations, but he only stretched his arms out at half length before freezing. This was a super creature. If he reached out his hand and the silver fox did not think kindly of his approach and got angry, he would likely lose his arm. Seeing Han Sen stop moving, the silver fox walked closer. It gently approached his leg and began licking it. Han Sen was so terrified that he almost kicked the silver fox in the face. But when he looked down, he noticed that the silver fox was licking him where Dongmu had bit him. Although the bleeding had stopped, the wound remained. But when the silver fox started licking it, something strange happened. With his own 2 eyes, Han Sen witnessed his wounds mysteriously vanish. He froze, almost unable to believe that the silver fox was healing him. The silver fox took a few steps back and, like a cute little girl, stood to look up at him with a tilted head. Han Sen was perplexed, and all at once, he felt his entire past understanding of creatures had not only been subverted but flipped entirely on its head. He tried reaching out his hand again and thought to stroke the silver fox's head, but still, a fear nagged at him not to do it. His hand froze in place once more. But then the silver fox elegantly approached and actively placed its own head into the palms of Han Sen's hand. It closed its eyes and rubbed its head there, seeming to enjoy it. Is this thing really a wild creature? Han Sen wasn't quite sure what to say, so he engaged the silver fox himself. With that same hand, he began stroking its head. The silver fox was like a little girl, in the way that it was cute when Han Sen stroked its head. Just seeing the creature made you want to hug it.
No.
Foxes are cunning. Is this thing just tricking me into hugging it? Maybe it's making me lower my guard, so it can attack me before I get a chance to defend myself. Han Sen told himself. This was a super creature, after all, so he couldn't afford to drop his guard. But after Han Sen stroked the silver fox a few more times, the creature walked between his legs and used its body to rub against them. It genuinely seemed as if it wanted some love.